And then finally, as she terms this section, atheists' children and their God. So general revelation falls under what's called common grace, meaning that it's bestowed by God upon all people, regardless of their spiritual condition. In contrast to special grace, meaning the blessing of salvation. And so all humans endeavor. And all human endeavors depend on God's common grace. So anything that we do, there's kind of that idea that there are no such thing as atheists, because we're all children of God in the sense that we're all made by Him and dependent on Him. The upshot is that humans are surrounded by evidence for God simply because we are made in the image of God, as probably the prime example. It's kind of the first example given in Scripture in Genesis. We live in God's universe, and we're upheld by God's common grace. So Romans 11:36, for from Him and through Him and to Him are all things. This may explain why, and here's the examples I was talking about. There are evidences in every culture that young children have a concept of God. When children are directly asked about the origin of animals and people, they tend to prefer an explanation that involves an intentional creator, even if the adults who raised them do not, which is interesting. There are also scientific evidence that show that built into the natural development of children's minds is a predisposition to see the natural world as designed and purposeful, and that some kind of intelligent being is behind that purpose. Even if a group of children were put on an island and they were raised by themselves, this scientist says, I think that they would believe in God. And it appears that we have been educated out of the knowledge of God by various departments. And so it seems like the idea to believe in a God is spoken about because Romans 1 tells us that there's evidence clearly presented, and then it goes on to why we don't have just a bunch of believers going around saying, well, I believe in God, but I just don't want Him ruler of my life. There are people that even say there is no God because of this.
Yeah, so good. So the first point that she's trying to make that comes out of Romans chapter 1, verses 19 and 20, is that we all have access to evidence. So we can't say that there is no evidence, right? We all have, and not only that, we can't say that we don't have access to the evidence. She says that according to these verses, what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. So we all have access to evidence. There's the physical evidence of nature. There's the evidence from life. There's the evidence from personhood. Right? So that's what she's that's the issue that she's trying to make here. So that's kind of her first point out of Romans chapter 1. Her second point, as you mentioned, is why then doesn't everybody, believe? If we all have access to evidence, that is, if these facts show that God exists, then why is it that everybody isn't a believer?
They have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that are made. So they're clearly perceived, therefore they're evidence, and people go, oh, okay, well, I see God.
Yeah.
So why not?
Yeah, right. So that's the question, right?